Right now, big banking, software, pharmaceutical, and tobacco corporations are lobbying governments from 12 countries to negotiate the dirtiest deal you've never heard of. There's a reason you haven't heard of the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are some major corporations and government officials that don't want you to know what's in the deal. For one, our food safety standards, environmental protections, and local labor laws could all be threatened under the TPP. We could all be forced to pay significantly more for the medicines we need, and you could be fined or even sent to jail for downloading copyrighted content on the internet. How will they know if you do it? Because your internet service providers could be required to watch your online activity. But that's not even the scariest part. The TPP gives corporations the power to sue our government in secret form tribunals over any law or regulation they claim affects their expected future profits. Don't believe it? It's already happening. Recently, after Canada said U.S. big pharma corporation Eli Lilly's drug price-raising patents were not legit, the firm sued the Canadian taxpayers for a staggering $500 million. And now billions of dollars are being demanded from Germany after it decided to phase out nuclear power following the Fukushima disaster and improve environmental standards for coal-fired electric plants. Philip Morris and Chevron are in on the game too, raiding taxpayer dollars and trying to reverse crucial policies we all rely on. Thankfully, not everyone is willing to sign on the dotted line just yet. In fact, most government officials still have no idea what they're even signing on to, for good reason. So far, Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives have united against fast-tracking the TPP. But there is a mighty corporate lobby that wants to make sure the deal is signed and railroaded quickly through Congress before we know about the damage it will cause us. We must get our senators and representatives to stop fast-track. Here's the deal. Without a strong public outcry, politicians will only hear the concerns of multinational corporations. And once the TPP is signed, it's here forever. There's no expiration date and no separation clause. This dirty deal has been deliberately branded as a free trade agreement. It is anything but free for people like you and me. And it's not really about trade. It could cost us our internet freedom, labor rights, access to affordable medicine, the safety of our food, and protections that keep our water and air clean. Nobody wants to be stuck with a backroom deal we don't want and never voted for. Find out more, speak up, and spread the word.
So basically, the TPP is like the North American Free Trade Agreement and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT Treaty, on steroids. You know, those sweet trade deals that sucked America's economic base dry, that set up what amounts to a kangaroo court system that dictates which countries will get a most favored nation status to trade with others, and which companies will be involved in the ruling, with no input or appeal from the public or any government in any way, shape, or form. Here is a brief audio clip of Sir James Goldsmith's speech to the U.S. Senate concerning the GATT Treaty and its detriment to America's economy. Even though the Senate seemed to agree with Goldsmith about its negative effects that he laid out in intricate detail, they voted for it anyway.
The hope at the time was to have you both together, and then we could really hear the back and forth and not listen to us. I had to raise some of the questions myself. I'm confident you would have raised. Let's have what opening comments you have, and then the questions from the members.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me back. First, I want to make clear, I think you know, Mr. Chairman, that I was in business. I believe in free markets. I believe in free enterprise. And I believe the purpose of the economy is not just to improve indices, but to improve the state of the nation. Yours, mine. So, I'm not an anti-free market man, nor an anti-free enterprise man. Quite the contrary. Felix, as you saw, is an old friend of mine. In fact, he's been my banker on and off for the past 20 years or more. But I'm in total disagreement with him. What you've heard today is the view from big business, of which I was part. And I believe the view from society in general is totally different. I believe it to be so different that I came out of retirement to start a political party in Europe, to become chairman of one of the 9 parliamentary groups in the European Parliament, to fight against what I believe to be one of the most destructive issues, proposals ever put before your assembly or any other assembly. In fact, I was watching television last night and I saw Senator Moynihan, and he said, he was there, was Representative Newt Gingrich, and the words he used were probably the most important vote of the decade. Could hardly be more important. Now, I'd like, if I may, to comment on some of the points that my friend Felix made. When talking about the loss of manufacturing jobs, all the figures you gave, he put that down largely to productivity. But in the last few months, we've seen Boeing, IBM, Advanced Microsystems, as well as joining all the other companies like Hewlett-Packard, going offshore to get cheap labor. That's nothing to do with productivity, Mr. Chairman. That's moving to get the cheap labor 40 times cheaper. And please don't think this is unskilled jobs. These are skilled jobs. These are high-tech jobs going there. Of course, there are also the unskilled jobs, but the skilled ones are going to highly skilled people, and they are moving offshore. And if you think that's productivity, then I think you would be wrong. Of course, there's an increase in productivity, and of course, that puts pressure on the job market. But why accentuate that pressure manifold at the very time when you've got the pressure? By encouraging, by creating a system that forces people to go offshore. I'd also remind you that not only are jobs being lost, but I confirm the figures that we all know. It was not a marginal drop in earnings that global free trade has brought in the United States. In the United States, before NAFTA has its effect, and before GATT, which is so much bigger than NAFTA, has its effect, your hourly wages, according to the Labor Department statistics, are 13.4% down in the last 20 years, and your weekly ones are 19.2% down. Then Felix also mentioned how competitive the states had become. Well, surely the measure of competitiveness is the balance of trade. And as you, Senator, pointed out, if you have the second worst balance of trade in history, $150 billion, that's not being competitive in world markets.
So the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we're working on, it's the biggest trade deal that we're working on right now, has to do with the Asia-Pacific region. And it reflects our values in ways that, frankly, some previous trade agreements did not. It's the highest standard, most progressive trade deal in history. It's got strong enforceable provisions for workers, preventing things like child labor. It's got strong enforceable provisions on the environment, helping us to do things that haven't been done before to prevent wildlife trafficking or deforestation or dealing with our oceans. And these are enforceable in the agreement. And Nike operates in the Pacific region, so they understand the competitive pressures they're under. Nike has factories all around the world. And let's face it, Mark, I think, doesn't mind me saying it, that some of these countries, they don't have the standards for wages and labor conditions that we have here. So when you look at a country like Vietnam, under this agreement, Vietnam would actually, for the first time, have to raise its labor standards. It would have to set a minimum wage. It would have to pass safe workplace laws to protect its workers. It would even have to protect workers' freedom to form unions for the very first time. That would make a difference. That helps to level the playing field, and it would be good for the workers in Vietnam, even as it helps make sure that they're not undercutting competition here in the United States. So that's progress. It doesn't mean that suddenly working conditions in Vietnam will be like they are here at Nike or here in Portland right away, but it moves us in the right direction. And if Vietnam or any of the other countries in this trade agreement don't meet these requirements, they'll face meaningful consequences. If you're a country that wants into this agreement, you have to meet higher standards. If you don't, you're out. If you break the rules, there are actual repercussions. And that's good for American businesses, American workers, because we already meet higher standards than most of the rest of the world. And that helps level the playing field. And this deal would strengthen our hand overseas by giving us the tools to open other markets to our goods and services and make sure they play by the fair rules we help write. The truth is we have one of the most open markets in the world. Folks are already selling stuff here. We got to be able to sell there. That requires us to enter into trade agreements to open up their markets.
Now, for those who get caught up in politics, there is a reason why I've never discussed anything of the kind in any of my previous videos. Because it's not important. Politics, like religion, is the opiate of the masses. It's like watching that old Punch and Judy show where you have two puppets on a stage pretending to be in opposition to each other, with Satan's little minions controlling the puppet strings behind the scenes. I don't waste my time discussing politics. I discuss agendas and its relevance to Bible prophecy. You don't have to know every single detail about any particular agenda to discover its true intentions when it comes down to it. If you really want to know where these treaties are meant to take us, if it isn't crystal clear to you already, all you have to do is look at the history of the European Union, and you will see that the EU also started off with so-called free trade agreements that resulted in things such as the elimination of tariffs and quotas for all who joined the EU, and the creation of a tribunal that can overrule any law that's been established within a country at the federal, state, and local level, violating its very sovereignty. The development of supranational political and economic European Union-style trade blocs as a stepping stone towards a world government has always been the agenda of Satan's advocates. It has been written about by many men in positions of power like Zbigniew Brzezinski. In case you don't know who this guy is, he was a national security advisor to John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Jimmy Carter. He also served as Obama's top foreign policy advisor. He was also the first director of the Trilateral Commission and a board member of the Council on Foreign Relations, two non-governmental organizations that are responsible for formulating this agenda of global integration. Anybody with an extensive degree of influence in any sector of society will be members of these types of private groups. Even Obama, who once spoke at the Council on Foreign Relations headquarters in New York.
Senator, first of all, thank you for honoring the wishes of the people and not taking lobbyist money. It's been reported that you and your wife are in the globalist CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations. I'd like to know if that is true, and also I'd like to know where you stand on the North American Union, which has been confirmed recently in the press. Ron Paul actually spoke about it in Congress. He's actually spent some money on it. This North American Union involves a union much like the European Union, only with Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and the possible merging of the money system into a piece called the Amero, which would actually strip the United States of some of its sovereignty and perhaps our rights. Where do you stand on that?
Well, first of all, I'm not, the Council on Foreign Relations, I don't know if I'm an official member. I've spoken there before. It basically is just a forum where a bunch of people talk about foreign policy. And so there's nothing, there's no official membership. I don't have a card, you know, handshake or anything like that. In terms of this North America, union, this has been something I know Ron Paul's talked about and people have been talking about. I have to say, with all due respect, that I see no evidence of this actually taking place. I think this has been something that has been ginned up in certain blogs on the internet. It was based partly on the fact that there's this highway being built in Texas that will facilitate more transportation and travel between Mexico and the intercontinental United States on up through Canada. And so people have perceived that this potentially means that somehow there's going to be this union like the European Union. There's no evidence that that's taking place. NAFTA helped to break down barriers of trade between those three countries, and I was opposed to that because I thought that it didn't have a weighting test. But I don't think that there's some conspiracy to create this one, continental government between Canada and Mexico. I see no evidence of that. All right?
In Brzezinski's book titled The Grand Chessboard, without going into great detail of its contents, he outlines his case for how America's global supremacy should be used to further the agenda for the unification of the world, starting with the development of EU-style trade blocs, which will then unite under a single global authority. He describes the expansion of the European Union, the formation of an Asian Union, an American Union, even an inter-union integration through transatlantic free trade agreements, which is what is being done right now with the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership Agreements. It is an ongoing process of ever-binding treaties for deeper integration, which is why the Trans-Pacific Partnership is vaguely stated to be a living agreement that can change over time any way they see fit, just like the various treaties that led to the creation of the European Union. There is no need for me to waste my time explaining in detail what is contained in these treaties. There's plenty of websites out there that are already doing this for you. I will just get to the point of what this video is all about. It's yet again a simple connection that I don't see being done at all. The mistake that some people make is the assumption that there will be a world government prior to the Antichrist's arrival, when prophecy states no such thing, Old and New Testament. In chapter 7 of the book of Daniel, he describes 4 different kingdoms that rises within the same time frame prior to the arrival of the little horn, who I identified to be Apollyon from the bottomless pit in Revelation 9. These 4 kingdoms are described as a conglomeration of every nation on earth, but he makes it very clear that they are 4 diverse kingdoms, so they aren't quite united as one. What Daniel is really describing is the rise of 4 diverse, supranational, regional governments similar to that of the European Union. It is not until Satan is cast down from heaven, which is years after Apollyon's arrival, that the 4 kingdoms combines as one body under Apollyon's rule as a 7-headed 10-horned beast of Revelation chapter 13, at which point your life as a saint will be a living hell. And when you compare what Daniel stated in chapters 2 and 8, he strongly indicates that Europe will end up being the 10-horned beast, where Apollyon will rise out of the bottomless pit. This process of global integration would definitely be a long one, absent a series of catalyzing and catastrophic events like a new Pearl Harbor, or 9/11 event, or a massive cyber attack, or like the events described in Revelation chapter 8, where hell and fire mixed with blood is cast down to the earth and burns a third of Earth's trees and grass, or a third of Earth's water supply turning red with the blood of many sailors and marine life due to a great mountain burning with fire being thrown into the sea, or a third of the water supply becoming undrinkable because of a burning falling star that poisons the water supply. Crisis situations are very important, because if there is anything that I know about Satan's advocates, is that they love to use crisis situations to push their agendas through. You can get more done in 5 to 10 years with a crisis than you can in 50 years of peace and security. With catastrophic events of these types, the world will pretty much be forced to unite for the sake of survival, for the allocation of the resources that will be left. With these types of events, there is no measurement to the type of draconian laws that would no doubt be forced on us under the guise of our sustainability. Along with a falling away from the faith, these are the events that we need to be looking out for. Don't expect a world government prior to Apollyon's arrival, because it just ain't happening.